Hey guys, welcome back. We've got the Zen back from the paint shop. The shell is painted. We need a few more days for the wheels and the panels to be painted. But now we're going to try to test with the engine inside. So now it's time to take out the engine from this Baleno. This is our donor Baleno. Basically, you get these Maruti engines, these G engines in different variations from different cars. You had the 1 liter in the Gypsy. It was in a 1 liter car. It came in the Maruti 1000, which was basically an S-Team body with a 1 liter engine. It came in the Zen as a carb and an MPFI, and it also came as a 1.3 and 1.6. A 1.3 in the S-Team as carb and MPFI, and in the Baleno as a 1.6 MPFI only. So what happens is when you're swapping it in, one of the biggest challenges would probably be the wiring. We're trying to make this bolt on, and if you did carb to carb, it was bolt on. If you did MPFI to MPFI, it was generally bolt on. You just have to connect stuff. The S-Team engine fits right in, it's quite easy, but the Baleno one is taller, it's a little heavier. We have to make a few changes, so we're gonna show you guys exactly what we're doing and show you all the steps, but we're gonna be fitting this in. We're gonna be using, right now the plan is using a Zen gearbox with this engine and a few S-Team parts that we sourced from the scrapyard, which we're gonna show you in a bit, that we will use to make this work together. We got the Baleno engine out, and now we've taken the engine. We're going to swap the engine and the gearbox using the Zen gearbox. We want closer ratios. It'll be a car for more acceleration. We could have used the Maruti 1000 gearbox. That apparently is the best match. It's the best when you're doing any of these swaps, either S-Team or Baleno. The next best is the S-Team, but we thought we'd keep it as a city car which accelerates fast. So we decided to use the Zen gearbox. We're going to have to do a few modifications also for mounting. We thought it was straightforward. It's not. There are a few things we're going to do. We're going to show you how we work around these problems today. But we've also had to go to the scrapyard to get some S-Team parts. To build a 1.6 Zen, you need the Zen, you need the S-Team, and you need the Baleno. If you want it to be bolt-on, you also need a Zen MPFI wiring. So we'll start with this side over here. In order to mount the Zen gearbox on the 1.6, you're going to need to change the flywheel. The Baleno flywheel doesn't work, so you have to change the flywheel. This is the used pressure plate and clutch underneath over here. In order to match this spline, you have to also put the starter from the Zen. Instead, you can put the S-Team one because it's a bit larger, so we use the S-Team starter. Up next, we have the parts that we absolutely needed if we wanted to keep it bolt on and use the MPFI wiring. We have the throttle body and the intake. We'll just swap the whole thing. I'm not sure yet if these injectors are bigger, but if they are, we'll put the Baleno injectors in. We then have the distributor. We needed to change the distributor, but along with the distributor, we also had to change a cam to match that. And we have this part over here that mounts everything, but we needed these three parts together. This is all about the engine because it's MPFI, as well as an S-Team ECU. So we needed an S-Team ECU, and all of this matches. This is what we needed. We also wanted to upgrade the brakes, so we've taken this from the scrapyard. These are S-Team discs as well as S-Team brake calipers. They have to match, and this is what we're going to do. So that's what we needed for this project. The rest is all about mounting it. So now we're going to go try to test fit the Zen engine back in. We're going to remove all the extra stuff that we don't need, but we're going to use the Zen engine sort of like a jig to make one of the other mountings. Right now we're swapping in the Baleno engine, but we're retaining the Zen gearbox. With any swap, I found that the drive shafts are really important, and retaining the gearbox makes it much easier. That way it's in the same position, you don't have to worry about the drive shafts and all that, and that becomes a complication. Cutting and welding drive shafts is a little dangerous, they tend to break. So this becomes the easiest thing when the gearbox is still from the same car, or it can be, interchanged. Let's say with Brios and Jazzes, you get a K24 kit where you have to change the drive shafts from what I've heard. So it makes it easier. The width might be more of one car, the width might be less. So you can't really, sometimes that match is difficult. we prefer not cutting and welding the drive shafts. It can be done, but it's a little bit tricky. So with this build, we have the G10B, we have the G13B and the G16B. All of them in different cars, and all of them have different mounting points. With all of the cars, we have a mounting point over here. So this can be interchanged by swapping the arm. So hopefully this arm will align properly. We have another mount over here for the gearbox right behind. That I'll show you guys later on from below. So that would be on the gearbox side. Then we have this mount, which wasn't from this car. This mount here is from the S-Team. And somehow we did have these holes here tapped. They already had the thread, there was no problem there. This mount has to be fitted here. In the Zen, you also have these rectangular mounts here, one over here and one behind, and you have this member. And what I've noticed from a lot of the B Zens, the Zens with the 1.6, what they do is they retain this mount, they put in this mount, but they delete this arm and this mount, these two mounts. So you're on three mounts, which aren't really, I would say let's try to at least keep four. This engine in any configuration always had four mounts. In the Zen, in the S-Team and in the Baleno, it always had four mounts at a minimum. So that's something we have to retain. What we're going to do is, right now we've put the Zen engine back in because we know that the gearbox will be at the same position and the gearbox will be the same. So now we bought a plate from the scrapyard, and we're going to make a plate that helps us mount this mount in place. We're starting with that. We've mounted new engine mounts here. Engine mount 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're bolting it in. Now the engine will be at its correct position, and then it's unloaded. It's not up or down in any way. What we're going to do now is we're going to alter this area and weld a plate here with nuts from the back. So that's what we have to do over here, and that's how we manage this mount. Then after that, we're going to put the Baleno engine in and alter a few things. We'll show you guys how we get through it as we go, but in this episode mainly we're just going to be mounting the engine, and that's a challenge itself, just mounting engines into place, making sure that the drive shafts aren't off. Otherwise they tend to break, or they have a lot of problems, they start to make noise. So they have to be straight, and today that's the only goal. Gearbox has to be straight and engine has to be in the correct place relative to that. So this here is part of the engine, the gearbox mount, and what we're going to do is we're going to place it over this. We're going to mark this area and we're going to make a plate that we can weld onto the chassis. There is no gap. It might even need a bit of a hammering, and we'll have to cut this area and put a fresh plate. But that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to make a plate and mount it over here. We picked up this sheet of metal from the scrapyard. It's quite heavy. What we're going to do is we're going to drill the holes and we're going to cut it to the correct shape. Okay. So here we have the engine mount. We fabricated this plate. We've drilled holes to match this this other part of the mount. This is like a frame that fits over and supports it. So we had to weld these nuts in place so they don't rotate. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fit it in place over here. So we'll find the right angle. We've had to hammer this area a bit. This has gone in quite a bit. So we had to hammer a bit here, and now the engine mount will fit along with the plate. So this is how it'll go. Now we're going to weld this with the MIG welder after mounting this. Okay. So we've now welded this piece in place. It's been welded from inside. It's been welded here. Now we'll have to add a piece and weld over here, and close it off so it's supported completely. There are nuts inside to grip onto the bolts. After that, the engine comes out, and we're going to have to fit this gearbox with that engine and put it back in and make these two mounts work, the front one and the back one. So here is a Zen spoiler we found in the scrapyard. We thought we'd use this. It's made out of fiberglass and it has this third brake light. We don't like it. It looks a bit tacky. So what we're going to do is we're going to tape it up, and we're going to use this as sort of like a form, like a mold. We're going to make a piece, put it in here and bond it on so it covers it up. then it's gonna have to get putty and stuff like that. But we're gonna start off by sanding this area so that it bonds correctly and roughing it up a bit. So here we have the spoiler. We've sanded down this area and we've roughed it up a bit so the fiberglass will sit correctly. We also had the lens which had the general shape. We didn't use this lens because it had a gap. It wasn't fitting flush. I guess that's how they were back then. What we did was we took this, put a bit of wax and tape over it, and we put fiberglass over it. So we basically have the shape. It's not the perfect mold, but you just have to do one piece, so it's fine. We'll later on sand it. We made a few cuts so this fits right, and now we're gonna fit this into this. We also have this resin and fiberglass, and I thought I'd show you guys the basics of how this works. We'll first take some, we have two types of resin over here. We have a normal polyester resin, which is thinner, and it's probably the last layer you'd use. It's the normal stuff. You also have something called gel coat, which is thicker, it's more viscous, and you'd use it for your first layer. So you get a smooth finish without any air pockets. So that's something we'll use. We have a few things we have to make over here. We have to work on the mold over here for the AMG bumpers. We have this little thing for, I'll show you guys what this is. It's a little showpiece, but the first layer should be gel coat. And we have some other stuff. Let's say this is the tow hook cover of our AMG kit. We need the resin to go into the cavities correctly. So we rather use resin than gel coat. That's the thing, it's too viscous, so it doesn't go into certain places. It might create an air pocket. So depending on your needs, you might mix the two, might make it work. We also have pigment. After pouring it and mixing the pigment, either the resin, the gel coat, or the mix, what you do is you put a bit of cobalt. So you take about, it depends on the concentration or the type you've bought. But in our case, we use something between 12 to 15 ml per kg. And it's quite rough. When it's raining, you require more of these components. Then we put, after it's mixed correctly, the cobalt, we'll have to put hardener. And the hardener has to be mixed the same way, almost the same quantity. So it's a bit of learning. You have to learn a bit about it. But in some cases it stays sticky, like in this case, and in some cases it's lost its tackiness. It's completely fine. You do need to use the right conditions. You can heat it up and completely cure it, but these are some of the things that have to happen. Later on we can put some putty over this and sand it down, but right now I'm just going to show you guys the basics of fiberglass. Okay. We've now done 3 of the mounts. So what we did was we mounted the engine using the Zen engine and gearbox. We did this mount over here. We mounted it with a mount over here, a mount over here. That's standard in the Zen. And then we mounted it with another mount over here. But we added an arm from the S team over here. We put in a plate, we've welded it in, sealed it up, so there are no holes, nothing can go in. And now we have to primer this, sand it again, primer it. But essentially the swap is ready. We could remove this, use the exhaust manifold from the Baleno and fit the engine now. It could be fine. But so that we don't stress out the exhaust manifold, what we're going to do, the headers actually, we're going to try to add this back. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this for now. We're going to put the Baleno engine in. We're going to pair it to the Zen gearbox. So that's something that's not straightforward. We'll have to work on the mounting holes. So we're going to pair the Baleno engine to the Zen gearbox first. We're going to place it back, and what's going to happen is we're going to do it back from this. So we're going to have two mounts from the Zen, basically the Zen gearbox, and we're going to have that distance correct. So the prop shafts are going to be at the correct distance. They're going to be at the right height, right angle, so it gets the proper drive. Then the engine has to be mounted accordingly. Hopefully a combination of the arms. If we use Zen arms, it's going to work over here, and over here we're going to have to figure out, because there are these There are other arms that fit. We're going to have to modify them for these two engine mounts. But that's how we're planning to do it. So we have more better mounting on this swap. There are actually 5 mounts, but that's how we plan to do it. We could do it with 3 mounts. There won't be a problem. It is possible. People do it. But it seems like the engine jumps too much. There's too much of flexibility. So we're going to add this and have it more rigid. Also, this seems like a sort of structural member, but we're going to have to cut it and modify it a bit. It's still better than not having it at all, but we're going to have to cut it a bit because the exhaust on the Baleno is a little bit more central. It's more on the third exhaust port, while the S-Team and the Zen have it more on the rightmost exhaust port. So it fits through this hole. There's a hole over here and it fits through. So we're probably going to have to modify the downpipe and make everything work. But it's a bit more of fabrication. We're still trying to keep the cost low by using stock parts. But that's the whole thing. We're trying to make it so that you guys can see this and know exactly how to do it. Now that we're putting the Zen gearbox onto this, we're going to have to also swap the flywheel. That's because the flywheel on these, they're not interchangeable. The S-Team and the Zen have the same spline for the starter, while the Baleno has a different one. I feel like the sizes would probably be different. That's another problem. Yeah, so if you notice, it's far bigger. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to put the S-Team flywheel. We're going to have to pair it with the S-Team clutch and pressure plate, and we're going to have to fit it back. We're going to also have to pair this with the starter from an S-Team. Mishka, we're going to have to pair it with the starter of an S-Team so that it matches these teeth. Okay, start it. So now we have the pressure plate of an S-Team on the engine. We've got the clutch and the flywheel also from the S-Team. This is all S-Team here. It was a little bit smaller, so was the flywheel and the pressure plate and everything else. So this all matches up. Now we're going to put the gearbox on, but the holes over here that mount up here are a little bit smaller. We have a 17 size bolt that goes here, while on this it's a little bit smaller. I think it's a 14, right? 14? So it's a 14 over here. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start with enlarging these holes, and then we'll look at what to do next. So these 2 holes on the top of the gearbox have to be enlarged. We've also cleaned this up since we were there anyways. We've used some petrol and cleaned up the whole gearbox. Next up, you removed this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this had to be removed. There was one of these locating, I don't know what you'd call it, a locating stud or something that was fitted over here, or it was here. I think this one. And this was touching over here. So we're going to have to figure out how to mount that together. There are some things that don't match up completely because the whole gearbox was a bit larger, but it was the same over here because this is part of the actual block. So these holes should match up from what I know. These holes have to be enlarged. We're going to use a drill bit. We have 2 of these drill bits. One's a little bit smaller, one's a little bigger. And currently we're using a 46, no, sorry, this is inches. We're using a 12 mm drill bit to get this hole. So we're going to bore it out a bit more. First using a smaller one, then a bigger one to get the size perfect and so it's centered correctly. So we slowly build it up. Hopefully this is enough, then we'll check if it works. Now we've rebored these holes over here. We had to use a 12.6 mm drill bit, and we were able to enlarge these holes here on the gearbox of the Zen. You could use a 13 mm and you'd have a bit of flexibility. So 13 mm over here, then you've got these aligned. So these matched up. These 2 bolts on the top that really hold the gearbox together, they matched up. But we have another 2 bolts that still, you can't really find the holes because this whole bell housing was a lot smaller. So this one doesn't match up. And there's another one on this side where the drive shaft is, that one doesn't match up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a grinder, we're going to grind this area so we enlarge the gap, and later on we're going to make a plate which sandwiches this together. So we're just going to make sure that this hole, the hole from the engine block has clearance to have some sort of grip here that we can put a nut and bolt. On this side, we'll have to do something similar. We're probably going to have to drill a hole through and through, and then we're going to be able to put a plate here with a nut and fasten everything together. Over here, we've got these longer bolts. We sourced this from the hardware store, and we've also got these nuts. So what we're going to do is we're going to grind them down a bit so that they fit here. One has to fit here and it has to attach. That's enough grip for this over here. And on the other side, we have one here. This was a longer bolt that I got. Actually, the job is pretty much done. It's enough grip. But what we could do is we could make a plate that fits here. A plate that fits, it bolts onto this and bolts onto this. So we have a proper, this whole thing is fastened properly. So it's mounted from the top and the two sides. We've ground down the nut and it's become quite thin in this area. It had to be done in order to fit. But now it should work. Should work right here and thread in. It's just about right. So what we did was we re-drilled these holes. They're enlarged. We ran a 12.6 or 12.7 mm drill bit and we enlarged these holes. We were able to do that by hand. It's aluminium, so it drilled well. And we drilled the gearbox. Over here we had to drill a bit and enlarge this so that the bolt would pass through. Now this is a plate we made. We made a plate with a hole over here and a hole over here. We welded a nut and we have this to fasten it in place. On the other side, we've taken a nut and we've ground it down. This helps it get into this gap, and we've put a bolt here. So this holds this together. Basically the forces are torsional, it's rotation, and most of it will be handled by the top bolts. But this is just supporting and keeping it together and also still helping it out there. There is no force this way, there's nothing like that. So this is what we really needed to do. We needed it to sandwich together, hold together. It was all aligned based on the shaft from the gearbox, and we were able to put it into the clutch. We were able to get the height correct and put it through. So that was done. Now we're going to replace this mount. It's all done according to the S-team. We're going to put this back. We're going to put this mount from the Zen, the mount arm, and that should align. We might have to modify it. And we have another mount over here. This will be the same because this is also Zen. So the gearbox is Zen, this will be correct. The gearbox is Zen here also, so this one will be correct. Hopefully that will bolt on. And this arm here is from the Zen. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it over here. And we're going to place it. But it looks like we're going to have to, this way. It looks like we're going to have to cut this arm and readjust it, because it's most likely that these are the correct ones. They're further in, they belong to something with a smaller bore probably. So we're probably going to have to go in over here, and that's something we can do now. So here we have the engine, we fitted it back. We have it on this mount. We basically use the Zen engine mount and the arm and everything. This fitted fine. There's a mount behind, that's also Zen. And this one here is S-team. This is an S-team arm. We made a plate and welded it to the body. So this is done. We had to hammer this area so the nuts that fasten everything together had the right clearances, the bolts could go through. We had to hammer a bit here for this mount, and we put this cover over it. So this supports the mount from the other side. So this is done. The engine actually is in place, but we were talking to some guys in Bombay, and they mentioned that if you have it on only these three mounts, it's possible the headers will crack. Over here we put the Zen exhaust manifold, and the holes are the same size as the Baleno one. So it's very likely that we could just have almost the same power if we retain this. But if it has any losses, what we're going to do is we're going to get headers made. If the owner wants some headers made, we could do that. We're going to have to paint this, whatever we worked on over here. Paint this adapter that we made. It's a spacer washer that we made. We'll paint this up and it'll look much cleaner. We'll also probably paint this brace, because initially we thought of modifying it so that we could fit the Baleno exhaust, but instead we're going to go this way. We're going to go straight. We're going to probably have to extend the exhaust manifold a bit, exhaust downpipe to make this work, but we'll check on that later. Now we have this brace for the engine mount in front that fits. It's this rectangular mount. This fits behind the engine as well. So we're going to extend that arm. There is a bit of a gap. It looks like 1 centimeter. So we'll get under the car, extend that arm. We'll also make this one fit correctly. It needs a bit of a washer on the top side from what we can see, but so it fits right, but there's a bit of a gap, there's a bit of an angle problem. So we're probably going to cut it here, shift it to the right space, re-weld it, and also make an opening for the O2 sensor. So we'll have to cut this over here and make an opening and figure that out as well. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay. We've got this little piece, and what we've done is we cut the Zen mount and gave it a gap because we needed to make about 1 centimeter of a gap. This piece is ground down. It has to be at a bit of an angle. So we're going to weld this in for now and take the mount out and finish the welding of it. Going through the lava. Start. So this is the mount from the back. It actually has 4 bolts that fit onto the engine. We're going to take the engine off and finish this later on today. We're going to finish welding it, grinding it down, cleaning it up and making it look good, painting it as well. Over here we have another arm. So this is the arm in the front. We had to make a notch for the O2 sensor. We're going to grind this down. We also had to shift this mount to a different position. We had to cut it a bit. It's shifted a bit further in. The placement is such that it has less of a clearance. So we're doing that part now. Next up, we'll be doing this, welding it together and finishing the welding of all the mounts. In order to pair the Baleno engine and the Zen gearbox, we had to enlarge these holes. We had to use something around a 12.6 to 12.7 mm drill bit, enlarge these holes on the gearbox, and we also changed the flywheel, the pressure plate and the clutch. We're going to put new ones later. We've just put used ones to get everything in line. We're still waiting on parts, but we were able to get everything in place. The spline fit in. All those parts are smaller. Also, this whole bell housing is smaller, so we had to do some changes for that. We then took a nut and a longer bolt and used that over here. We had to shave a bit of the of that nut so it fit correctly over here. And then over here we made a little plate. This is something we forgot to grind down, but there's a nut here. This holds this together, and this is where the old engine gearbox mount of the Zen used to be, while this is the Baleno one. So you can see that there is quite a bit of a difference. So this is a plate which keeps everything together, and it's quite strong. So this is one of the things we made. Otherwise, some people put washers, but this is a stronger way of doing it. After that, we put the engine back with this mount in place, the back mount which fits over here for the gearbox, and there was another mount which belongs to the Zen. So we took the Zen mount arm, which is like this, and we placed it over here, and we then had the engine in place. But that was probably enough. In some cases it's enough, but we've heard that the headers crack if the engine doesn't have enough support. So when you accelerate hard or do some hard engine braking, the headers could crack with all that torsion. So what we then did was we made adjustments to the old engine mount arms. So this is the old engine mount arm from the back. That fits over here. That fits over here. And it goes to this rectangular mount back here. So it fits here. That's a modification we had to make. We've also put nuts to give it that difference in depth, because they're not all equal. So we had a bit of a problem with that, but that's all right. So this is something we had to make. We made it a bit different. It's all right. It's been welded inside and out, so it's okay. But we also had to modify this mount. So this is the one which is in front of the car. Second. We then had to make this arm. This is the old Zen arm. We had to adjust this area. We cut this, we trimmed it a bit and lifted it up a bit. So there was some adjustment over here that had to be made, because it seems like this area has come out a bit like this. So that was one adjustment that was made. We also had to make a little cut for the O2 sensor. So this was a modification. We made a cut for the O2 sensor. The exhaust is a little bit higher in this because the engine is taller. It's probably taller by about, I think, 3 centimeters or something like that. So it's quite a bit. Also the bore is bigger. So we have these two problems. One is the height and one is the bore. So these two changes had to be done. And now the engine can be fit in place. We're gonna have to just paint this up. We're gonna do that next. Paint up whatever we had to do over here. And we're now gonna get to, in the next episode of course, changing all the parts around. We're waiting on new parts. We're waiting on a new timing kit so the engine works right. One of our friends from Bombay, Nikhil Wagle, he's into a lot of these Marutis. So he found me some bits for me. We've got a new clutch for this. We've got a new pressure plate. It's all, sometimes we've compared it to other websites. There's a popular website and the prices were better compared to the website. So, you know, you really have to compare. We did struggle with getting parts for this. We're still waiting on a lot of the stuff. We have a bag full of parts, but some of it was sourced locally. Some of it was sourced from Bombay, then another round from Bombay, also from a website called Budmo. But, you know, prices varied, and sometimes the main problem was availability. So I think this platform is starting to get a bit too old, but it's still possible to find it. We're gonna have to redo the timing kit, change the timing belt, change the tensioner. We're gonna change the cam from the used S-Team cam. We're gonna change the distributor. We're gonna change all this. It's not gonna be coil on pack anymore. We're gonna change the intake manifold and everything else. And that's all gonna be from the S-Team, so it works like an S-Team. And all that has to be changed around. We're also gonna have to hammer away on the inner fenders, inner wheel arches, so that the new 15-inch CDR wheels fit in correctly. So these are all these little things that have to be done next time. Mostly we'll just show you a few changes, and we'll get to that. So I hope you liked watching the video and I gave you enough information on how to do this project. I hope you guys share it, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.